ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਫਿਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੇਖ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਮੁੱਦਾ ਤੇ ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਥੋੜੀ ਜਿਹੀ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਹੁਣ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਸ਼ੇਅਰ ਕਰਨ ਲੱਗੇ ਆ ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਯੂਨਾਈਟਿਡ ਸਟੇਟਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਦੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਸੋਚਦੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਲੀਗਲੀ ਇੱਕ ਚੰਗੇ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਇੱਥੇ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਟ ਹੋ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ H1B ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਇੱਕ ਬਹੁਤ ਵੱਡਾ ਬਾਰ-ਬਾਰ ਨਾਮ ਸੁਣਨ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲਦਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ H1B ਵੀਜ਼ਾਸ ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ H1B ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਦੀ ਲੋਟਰੀ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਨੂੰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਸਤੇਮਾਲ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ ਸੋ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਬਹੁਤ ਖੁਸ਼ੀ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ ਕਿ ਅੱਜ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹੇ ਕੁਝ ਪੈਨਲਿਸਟ ਜੁੜੇ ਹੋਏ ਹਨ ਜੋ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਏਰੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਐਕਸਪਰਟੀਜ਼ ਰੱਖਦੇ ਕਿੰਨੇ ਸਾਲਾਂ ਦਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਤਜਰਬਾ ਅੱਜ ਉਹ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਸ਼ੇਅਰ ਕਰਨ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਹਨ ਸੋ ਪਲੀਜ਼ join me in welcoming our guests for this evening from the Nachman, Fulvani and Zimovcak Law Group. We have two panelists here with us. Welcome to you both. Sat Sri Akal.
Sat Sri Akal.
That was wonderful, David. Thank you for being here, David H. Nachman, and of course Ludka Zimovcak of Nachman, Fulvani and Zimovcak MPZ Law Group. It's so good to have you both take some time and connect with our viewers about this. This is such an important topic within our community. But before we kind of get into all the nitty-gritty of this, I'd love to hear a little bit about your firm, MPZ. What kind of work do you guys specialize in? David, I'll start with you.
Great, Aashmeeta. So we are immigration lawyers, and we handle the full spectrum of immigration law services with a predominant focus on general business and corporate immigration. And I've been in practice myself for 35 years, and Ludka and I have been practicing together for quite a while. I'm going to let Ludka tell you how long.
About 18 years.
Wow.
Close to 20 years.
Yeah. My goodness.
Yeah. And you'll probably get a good sense of that from the discussion that we have.
Right. And what kind of clients do you normally work with? I can imagine in the immigration field, it's a pretty diverse array.
Go ahead, Ludka.
We get individual clients, we get students, professors, researchers, but we also get corporate clients, bigger firms, smaller firms, and also families. That's really important, family unity. So David was mentioning about the business immigration, but of course we do handle family immigration as well.
That's really good to know, especially since when the issue of immigration comes up, oftentimes, especially within the South Asian diaspora, there's a mindset that it's very difficult to immigrate with your family. But of course, there are, resources and options out there. So, I want to talk today about the H1B visa, specifically the lottery system. I have to tell you both H1B, this name, this title is very popular within the South Asian community. Everyone has some idea of what an H1B visa is, but probably not the most accurate one. So David, I'd like to start with you first. Specifically when we talk about the visa lottery system, what is the H1B visa lottery and how exactly does it work?
Right, so that's a great question, and as you rightfully point out, it's a big question in the South Asian community as well as professional communities around the world, because individuals want to come to the United States and engage. They are usually highly skilled workers for the most part. And what H1B means, I think we need to just sort of take a step back and explain what H1B means. H1B means a professional who is serving in a specialty occupation. And the definition of professional by regulation is an individual who has the equivalence of a US baccalaureate degree. So basically what it is it was a carve-out that was created in the law to allow for the United States to be able to bring the best and the brightest to the United States. And those are individuals who have a baccalaureate degree or its equivalent. Now, what happened was back in the day when I first started doing H1B petitions, and we'll take a stroll down memory lane, is that we didn't have any quotas to deal with. So we were just pumping out H1Bs. And then what happened was in 1990, under what's called IMAC 90, it was implemented in November of 1991, they put a cap on the number of H1Bs that could be permitted, and that was 65,000. And later on, I think it was about 20 years later, after the Y2K situation, what they did was they allowed another 20,000 of individuals who have U.S. master's degree. So that's what we're dealing with when we talk about a lottery. We're saying that there are 65,000 H1B visas available for individuals who have the equivalence of a U.S. baccalaureate degree, and 20,000 for individuals who have a U.S. master's degree. And so that's the lottery. And what the question that we get frequently are, what are my chances? So, of course, my regular answer to all our clients and all our friends is if you're not in it, you can't win it. So you definitely want to be in the lottery, and you want to try to take advantage of doing that. And so that's where we are right now, is in what we call H1B season. And we are getting our clients, our employer clients, ready to do registrations for prospective H1B beneficiaries.
Right.
And the start dates that we're going to be looking at is like October 1st of 2024. So that's what we're gearing up for right now.
Okay. David, I appreciate, I had several questions for you, but in your one answer, you answered a few of them. But I want to clarify here. So the number that you mentioned just now for each of these specific requirements, the bachelor versus the master's degree, are those numbers still current for the current lottery that we're discussing that's, like you said, opening later this year? Or are those numbers revised every year?
No, they're not. It's a great question, and one that we get frequently. But no, those numbers have remained. They've remained constant for many years. And the only way that would be able to be changed would be some type of a rulemaking process that's done by
legislation,
Congress. So,
whatever.
Yeah.
And
so they would have to announce that. Yeah.
Not that it's funny, but it is interesting to know, while that number is fixed, the number of applicants probably grows every single year. Ludka, I'm sure you can give us some more information about this. So David mentioned some eligibility requirements specifically tied to an individual's education background. Are there any other requirements to participate in the lottery specifically?
I just want to mention that it's not just about the bachelor's degree, but it's also about the position. So let me give you an example. You may have somebody having PhD, so they would qualify, but the position itself must require at least a bachelor's degree. So it's not just about the degree, it's also about the position that is offering to that individual. That's really, really important. As far as the companies, we get the question quite often, like, does it have to be a big company? No, there are no specific requirements. As long as they have job available, they're offering bona fide job, it's fine. It could be small company, could be bigger company, it doesn't really matter. So company is totally fine, but I just want to point out it's really important that the position itself is professional and in specialty occupation. That's very important.
And, once again, if we look at it from a common sense lens, right, we're not all attorneys, and, talking to an average person, the position that you're applying for that is going to essentially, sponsor you, that position must necessitate a certain level of education level, maybe relevant experience. And it helps if the position is in a niche area where perhaps companies can say, no, we need this individual from India or from where have you to fill this need in our organization. If these winners, we're talking about some deadlines here. We're going to get more information from you about that as well. But when they do the selection of this, and I'm sorry if this is a silly question because literally the word lottery is in the term, but is there any specific way that the selection is done? Is there more to it than just essentially pulling, numbers out of a hat? Ludka?
Unfortunately, it's just luck. It doesn't matter what country, it doesn't matter what position, it doesn't even matter what type of degree. As I mentioned, PhD, wow. The only advantage would be for those that have a U.S. master's degree and higher because of the additional 20,000. But other than that, it really, it's just luck. And, we were talking about numbers. Last year, there were over 780,000 H1B registrations.
Wow.
So it almost doubled from the year before.
Wow.
So, the good news is it should be better. We all hope that it's going to be better this year because we do have H1B registration rule that just came out on February 2nd. And the whole system will be different. So it's still going to be lottery, but it should be better because it will be based on the beneficiary and not based on the number of registrations. So last year, what was happening, one applicant would have 10 companies doing H1B registrations just to increase the exactly. So this year, we're pretty excited about it with the new rule for this upcoming season that will open up on March 6th. It will be based on beneficiary. So we think that the numbers will be definitely better.
You have this almost international practice, not almost, it is international. You work with folks from all over, and even today I want to let my viewers know if they want to connect with you directly about any of the conversations that we're having, they can check out your website. Specifically, we're talking about H1B visas, the lottery system. We have some important dates coming up and some hopefully beneficial rule changes that will make the system a little bit more efficient. But I have to ask, because this, unfortunately, if just looking at the odds, you said over 700,000 applicants, maybe 20,000, lottery winners, so to speak. What happens if the application or the applicant's, paperwork isn't selected in the lottery? Is that something that can bar them from ever doing this again? Basically, what happens? David, Ludka, whoever wants to take this.
Well, actually, it's never a problem to enter multiple lotteries. That's definitely something that we would recommend. If the individual wants to go into multiple lotteries, they should definitely do so. If they haven't won and connected with an employer, they should always feel free to try. There's no prejudice to going into multiple lotteries. That's not a problem at all. So that's certainly one way to increase the chances. I'd like to just take a step back and to mention, Ludka had mentioned the 20,000 for the master's degree before, and I just want to explain the reason why the way it works is it has to do with the way the visas are chosen in the lottery, that increases their chances. Because what happens is the way the government chooses the way they choose these lottery entries, at least for the 20,000 that are master's degree, they first conduct the lottery on the 20,000, and then what happens is anyone in that 20,000 that's not chosen drops down into the pool again. So really, people who have a U.S. master's degree, the reason why they have a leg up on the process is because there are two bites at the apple. So for folks who have the master's degree, they are more likely to, there's a higher probability that they're going to be chosen in the lottery. So, but yeah, individuals can definitely go into the lottery several times. Go ahead, Ludka, I'm sorry.
In addition, I just want to mention, we are not sure, Aashmeeta, about this season, but there was a second lottery. I just want to mention that in August. So after the first lottery, all the H1Bs were filed between April 1st to June 30th, and whoever didn't use their selection, it was put back into the pool, and there was a second lottery in August. So, some of the people unfortunately left. They went, back home to their countries, and they were very happy once they found out that there was a second lottery. We don't know what's going to happen. 2 years ago, there were 3 lotteries.
Oh my goodness.
The third one is in November.
Wow.
And you would think, how is this possible? There were so many applicants, right? Well, what happened was, there could have been, as I mentioned, individual that would have, let's say, 5 companies filing, right, doing registration. Let's say 3 would be selected for that one individual. They would probably just proceed with the one, and then there would be 2 selections that were unused. So they were put back into the pool. So that's why they are changing the system right now. We are not sure about the second lottery, but it's important to watch out for it, definitely.
100%. And once again, it's so important to stay connected to the right individuals, who can inform you on these matters. I think for an average person, it's so difficult. A simple Google search just does not give you the right information anymore. It's so important when it's literally your life, your family's life, and such important legal matters at hand to connect with the right individuals. Once again, your website is on the screen. So we're talking a little bit about the H1B lottery itself, what happens if you don't make it, how how you can keep trying, and that you should in fact try multiple times if you have the opportunity. Can someone have a potential employer sponsor them for an H1B visa outside of the lottery system?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's something that Ludka and I spend a great deal of time on, because we will do what we can to help individuals understand that going into the lottery is certainly one option, but circumventing the lottery, which is definitely permissible, is a great way to deal with issues. Again, the lottery system exists, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to do it. So we spend time looking at the employer, doing an analysis to figure out whether they are what we refer to as cap exempt. And so there are a couple of cap exempt classifications for H1B, one of which is, for example, if an individual is working for an academic institution of higher education, those are considered cap exempt. And so we'll encourage individuals, if they can, to get jobs at academic institutions. But even more so, if they get a job with an organization that is quote unquote affiliated with an academic institution, that's also deemed to be cap exempt. Or if they get a job with a not-for-profit organization that is doing applied research, or they're doing a job for a government research organization. Right. So we want to take a look at the employers, and we want to see whether or not we can avoid the need to go into the into the lottery. Of course. And then there's some other little tricks of the trade, which we'll tell you about in a second. But I'm going to hand it over to Ludka, because I know she's dying to tell everyone about concurrent H1Bs. Yes. Go ahead, Ludka.
Yeah, well, concurrent H1Bs are great. So, for example, David mentioned cap-exempt H1B. Let's say somebody's working with the university or nonprofit organization, so they never had to go through lottery. They can just apply for H1B at any time. They actually could get second H1B that is called concurrent H1B and work with the organizations that would normally be subject to the lottery. So that's why David mentioned it's kind of a circumventing the lottery, because that individual would be able to work for two organizations, even more. Let's say 25 hours with one organization, 5 hours with the second one. But the key here is that they have to maintain that cap exempt H1B. That's really important. But now, it's a nice little tool, definitely.
It certainly beats, fighting for a spot against 700,000 other people. So now, if you get your H1B from one employer, what are some of the things that someone should know about, an applicant should know about, if they want to transfer their H1B? And this is specifically if they're selected in the lottery itself. How difficult or how doable is it even to take your H1B from one employer, transfer it to the next if you've gotten lucky with the lottery?
I think lottery is the most difficult part. So once they get through the lottery, they actually have the H1B. They have to start the H1B because the H1B starts in October. So what we have seen that people get approved on the H1B, and during the summer, they want to change the job. That's really not a great idea. It's important to start the H1B, and then it's really not too difficult to change employers, because obviously the new employer does not have to go through the lottery. They do have to file H1B petition, but typically there is no issue with that.
Okay, great.
So once the H1B is activated, which Ludka just referred to, then there's also the possibility of using what's called AC21. AC21 was a law that was passed which allows under Section 105C for individuals to be able to port their H1Bs to new employers, and they can then start work once the new H1B has been filed.
I'm so glad you shared that, because some of the feedback we always hear, amongst our viewers is this trepidation or hesitation to kind of rock the boat with your employer. And oftentimes there are employers that use that almost as a tool to say, hey, your stay, your visa could be in jeopardy if you don't work here anymore. And that's wrong, right? That's not true at all. You can easily, once you have the valid visa, transfer from one employer to the next.
It's a great point.
There is a grace period. I think around 2016 or 17, there was a rule they made it much more clear that now there is a 60-day grace period. So, for example, if they leave the employer or they, they get fired, they have 60 days to do something, either leave or change the employer or change to a different visa classification.
Great, good to
Yeah,
know. I want to
yeah,
talk.
and
Yep, go ahead,
I'm
please.
sorry, Aashmeeta, I was going to say that your observation about AC21 is a really good one, at least with regard to Section 106C, because 105C, changing employers. What it essentially did is it unshackled individuals from being forced to work for one employer. So they were able to move, and basically what we're in favor of free market. And so what it did is it allowed different employers to compete for these highly desired skill sets and to be able to bring them, to different companies, and also to hopefully raise the pay scales of the individuals with these highly desired skills.
So to speak, we have some important dates ahead of us. But before I get to the dates part, there's another area that unfortunately there's a lot of misinformation, because unfortunately, folks love to consult Facebook, WhatsApp University, or their best friend Google. But not everything you see on the internet is correct. So I'm really glad we have professionals with us today, and you guys can guide us. When you get an H1B visa through the lottery, say you've gotten lucky, you've obtained the visa, how long do you actually have from that point to legally reside within the United States?
Well, the H1B visa, again, as Ludka had pointed out earlier, takes effect on October 1st. So the H1Bs that we get approved for our clients will be effective on October 1st of 2024. And the individuals, once they activate those H1Bs, will be able to have H1Bs for an initial grant of 3 years with a 3-year incremental extension. However, in addition to that, there are certain individuals from certain countries that have backlogs, most notably India and China. Those are the two where we have very significant backlogs. If those folks start their green card process and are either well into the perm labor certification process or have an approved perm labor certification, they can apply for H1B in 1-year increments beyond the 6 years. Or if they have an approved I-140, they can get 3-year incremental extensions such that they have the H1B until they get the green card. So that's really the power of the H1B and why it's so competitive to get it and why so many applicants apply in this lottery system.
Absolutely. I mean, once again, any power is only as good as your ability to use it. And I'm so glad you guys are kind of walking us through how our viewers can avail the H1B visa correctly. So now let's get the information about the H1B cap and this registration, right? David, Ludka, you guys were both referencing this earlier. So the H1B cap registration, it's about to begin soon. What information, what do you think potential applicants need to know at this point?
It is really important to plan and very important. I mean, for us, it's obvious, but I just got that question this morning. It's not the applicant that can do the H1B registration. It has to be the company. Mm-hmm. It is done online, so they have to have their USCIS accounts available. Mm-hmm. Filing is paid online. It's $10, mm-hmm. and it will open up on March 6th. So it's really coming up really soon. Right. And there are some changes with the accounts, and I think those will be effective as of February 28th. So there are a lot of changes with the H1B, with the accounts, with the fees in general. So it's really important to stay on top of it. USCIS is doing a really good job with providing different webinars, and, they provide a lot of information. So, companies can definitely review that on www.uscis.gov. But I think important would be, just gathering the information, making sure that the position is a professional one, is a specialty occupation. We typically do analysis, make sure that the person does have a degree. You mentioned folks from India. If they have a foreign degree, it's really important to do credentials evaluation. You don't want to wait, after the.
Absolutely. I mean, if we're looking at March 6th, a lot of this information or this background work applicants should have already done. But once again, I'm glad you guys are with us. We're talking about this right now. So we're talking about the cap. I know, Ludka, you were mentioning, how the process essentially does kind of change year to year. So how does this year's cap, the 2024-2025 season, compare to previous years?
So this is the 4th year. In the past, there was no H1B registration. So everyone had to file the H1B, and then they ran the lottery and just rejected the cases. So it was crazy. So this is a 4th year that, employers could do H1B registration. This year is different, as I mentioned, because it's centered around the beneficiary. So it really will not matter. Let's say if one individual, the prospective H1B holder, has 10 companies, they will still have the same chance as the individual who only has one company doing H1B registration. So it's a big difference, and we expect much lower number because last year, I think there were only about 300 or 400,000 applicants. It's just there were a lot of registrations because there were a lot of multiple registrations by different companies for the same individual. Now, it's going to be just around the beneficiary.
So this is really, really good news. I mean, at the end of the day, they are making the system more efficient and making it more fair for each individual applicant. So everyone has, mostly the same odds. That's really good to know. So I know we talked a little bit about in terms of how people get these updates, how folks kind of, once they apply for the lottery, when they're in the United States, there's a lot of questions that come up specifically around stamping with the H and the L visas. Now, there are some people, who feel or are hearing that folks with H and L visas can get stamped in the United States. Can you give some clarity around that, David?
Sure. So this is something that was announced as a pilot program. It was announced, I want to say, probably about a year ago. They were always talking about it, but they finally put it online. And basically what they've done is they've opened up a certain very limited number of visas to individuals from India and Canada to allow them to be able to do what's called stateside processing. It's kind of interesting. Stateside processing was actually in play prior to 9/11. And what happened was after 9/11, due to what they referred to as security issues, they took that process offline for whatever reason. And it's really not clear at all to me why they did that. But they decided that they didn't want to do stateside processing anymore. So now it was actually starting at the end of February, they opened up the opportunity for individuals to be able to do stateside processing and to get visa stamps in their passports. Now, I have personally not heard of any that have come back yet from the Department of State. I don't know, Ludka, if you've heard of any that have actually come back, but I know that a good number have actually been submitted. So
it's extremely limited. So unfortunately, none of my clients would qualify. So they only have 20,000 because it's a pilot program. It's just for H1B renewals, not even for else yet. And it's only for those that had prior visa stamping done in India with a certain time frame in 2021. It had to be in 2021 or in Canada between 2020 and 2023. So very limited. And there are other eligibility requirements. So I have to say it's a very small group of people that will qualify for that. And the way it works is, it's nice because they're in the US. They don't have to worry about stressing and being stuck abroad. So it's definitely convenient. Right. But, it's for now, it's just a pilot program. So we really hope it's going to be for else as well and for all H1Bs, not just the renewal, but I guess time will tell.
Once again, I cannot stress enough that trying to navigate the system or just get these answers by Googling online is so not enough. You have to talk to professionals who know all of the updates, all of the current changes. I'm so glad you guys are talking with us. You keep showing your website on the screen, so individuals, if they have more questions, they can connect with you directly. I want to change gears a little bit. So let's talk about business immigration, because in our community, specifically between our viewer base, there is such a high degree of entrepreneurship, and there are a lot of individuals that have their own businesses that are looking to kind of get updates on business immigration. Are there any new policies? Are there changes we should be aware of?
Ooh, that's quite a it's quite a question. So the one thing about business immigration in general, the only thing that remains constant, I would say, is change. And we are constantly monitoring, what's going on. I think that you make a great point about where you get your information from. And I think that for Ludka and I, the most frustrating are individuals who call our office or send us emails telling us that their friends told them this or told them that. And we spend a great deal of time trying to explain that, your friends are probably not telling you the whole story. I had a meeting with several clients yesterday who were telling me that their friends informed them of a way in which they could immigrate to the United States, and it was just completely wrong. And so I was able to set them on the right short-term and long-term track. So, what you said is absolutely correct. In terms of business changes, the Federal Register comes out on a daily basis with changes that are dramatic. Sometimes we have dramatic changes through, regulatory. They have regulatory rulemaking. But I think the challenge in the immigration field, and I would say not just business, but also in family, is that we have guidelines and policies that come out where the government says, well, this is the way we think this should be interpreted, or this is the way we're going to change the adjudicator's field handbook. And it's just almost like, and I refer to it, I don't know, Ludka, whether you say this too, but I say it's a political football, because it just always depends upon how the politics in the United States is, the political winds are changing.
And God forbid it's an election year.
Exactly, and that makes things very difficult for us, because obviously there are stresses that are put on the administration to deal with things like, and this is not obviously relevant to our discussion about business immigration, but there are issues right now that are in the news on a daily basis about the southern border, and how porous the southern border is, and how pressures are being placed on the administration to deal with that. And so although it's not relevant to the business immigration side, which again, we do spend a great deal of time focusing on, there are these other issues that just continue to come up and affect, I guess, the overall immigration process. So I think I would say policies are tough.
But I think there's no day that there wouldn't be some change. Almost every day there is something new. Whether it's from embassies, something has changed. Whether it's here in the U.S., there is always something new. With the H1B, we're just talking about the registration rule, but there is a proposal that came out at the end of October, and that is not final yet. They only finalized the H1B registration rule, but there are other aspects of the H1B that, will be changed. We don't know when, this year, next year, so constantly there are some changes, and it's really, really important to stay on top. I know you did mention our website, but we, do recommend to people to just sign up for our newsletter to just get that most important information that is new, because there's just a lot of information out there, as you mentioned, and it's so difficult to find out what is important.
Another point, just to echo, David, what you said, folks talking to each other about it, every case is so different. You really cannot listen to, a friend or a family member And, you know, even if their information is accurate, that doesn't mean it'll apply to you or be relevant to your case. So it's really, really important when it comes to this kind of stuff to consult professionals. I'm so glad you guys joined us today to give us some of this information. There's so much to break down here. Unfortunately, I don't have more time in today's segment, but I'd love to get some closing thoughts. Ludka, you know, overall, when we look at this year's H1B lottery system, once again, we're about to kick off. What big call to action or closing messages do you have for our viewers today?
Very important, do not rely on a lottery, have backup options. We didn't talk about it much, but there are other visas that may be even better. You know, for those that have great credentials, would be an O1, for example. You know, we are always happy to review resumes, but you know, it's important to have a backup plan. Do not rely on a lottery because chance is not great to win.
Good to know. David?
So probably of most interest to the greater Southeastern community, I think that it's important to note, and Ludka, actually, I'm really, you took the words right out of my mouth, and that is other visas. There's an alphabet soup of other visas, and we use those visas in our bag of tricks to be able to come up with options to circumvent this H1B lottery. I think it's absolutely, just my humble opinion, it's absolutely pathetic that the United States relies upon a random lottery to get highly skilled workers, because it puts us at a competitive disadvantage.
Yes.
And if we're trying to take advantage of the worldwide brain drain to open our doors to getting the best and the brightest who ultimately will contribute to the economic infrastructure of the United States, I mean, what are we doing? We really should just open it up and let it be free market. That's quite frankly my opinion. But Ludka and I try to do that.
What a refreshing and almost revolutionary way to look at immigration. And in the United States, we know that comprehensive immigration reform hasn't taken place in over 40 years. But on a day-to-day basis, there are a ton of changes that no average person could be expected to keep up with. But you guys specifically are doing that. Nachman Fulvani, Zimovcak Law Group, David, Ludka, thank you so much for joining us. We'd love to have you guys back on our program to share more information. But for today, that's all the time we have. Have a good rest of your evening. Once again, the website is visaserve.com, www.visaserve.com. You can connect with them directly. Have a good evening. Sat Sri Akal. जी so once again, जिस तक immigration ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਆਂਦੀ ਹੈ, ਅਸੀਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਸਹੀ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੋੜਦੇ ਹਾਂ, but ਬਾਕੀ ਕੰਮ, ਬਾਕੀ ਜ਼ਿੰਮੇਵਾਰੀ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ। ਅਗਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਅੱਜ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਲਈ ਕੋਈ ਕੁਐਸਚਨਸ, ਕਮੈਂਟਸ, ਕੰਸਰਨਸ ਰੱਖਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹੋ, ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਈਮੇਲ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ aashmeeta@jusbroadcasting.com, info@jusbroadcasting.com। ਹੁਣ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਦਿਓ ਇਜਾਜ਼ਤ। ਸਤਿ ਸ੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ।